Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day, it will brighten all the way. If you keep on the sunny side of life. There's a lot of songs that are written about church life. And we talked about last week that a church is not a building, it's a spiritual building. That's what this song is about. Well, if I was a quarreler, I'd tell you what I'd do. I would stop all my quarreling. I'd be a peacemaker and work on the building too. Working on the building. I'm working on that building. I'm working on the building. For my Lord, for my Lord. Working on the building. It's a Holy Ghost building. Working on the building. For my Lord, for my Lord. Now that's a great thing about these songs. You can just kind of fill them in. If I was a yeller, I'd tell you what I'd do. I'd stop all that yelling, stop all that yelling. I'd start telling and work on the building too. I'm working on the building, working on the building, working on the building. For my Lord, for my Lord. It's a Holy Ghost building. It's a Holy Ghost building. It's a Holy Ghost building. For my Lord, for my Lord. Well, if I was a hater, tell you what I'd do. I'd just stop all that hating. Stop hating and work on the building too. I want to be a lover. I'm working on the building. I'm working on the building. I'm working on the building. For my Lord, for my Lord. I'm working on the building. It's a Holy Ghost building. Working on the building. For my Lord, for my Lord. Working on that building, I'm working on his building, for my Lord, for my Lord. It's a Holy Ghost building, it's a Holy Ghost building, it's a Holy Ghost building, for my Lord, for my Lord. You know, I hope last week you watched my talk about racism and rage and riots. There's a lot going on, and I really want you to watch that and allow yourself to be challenged a little bit on this. It's really just kind of about my story. And then on Sunday, we talked about the church and what is a church. And on this coming Sunday, we're going to talk what is a church and what does a church do, or what is a church supposed to do. You know, and this is a related subject, but it kind of goes like this. It's like, what, you know, the question tonight really is this: how do you want to be known in life through all this that's going on and all that's going on in our society right now, with a lot of stuff happening, protests and a lot of pain out there. How do you want to be known in the middle of all this? We got the pandemic, we got the protests, we got all kinds of questions and different perspectives, but how do you want to be known? Because here's how I want to be known, and I hope that you want to be known. How do you end up being known as God's child? If you want to be known as God's child, this is going to be important for you to pay attention to. It really is. You know, being known as God's child. Now, I know that this is maybe hard to admit, but you aren't known as God's child by preaching. As a matter of fact, the Bible says, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name do many wonderful works. And then and didn't I cast out demons? And then I'll say to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work iniquity, or you who are lawless. So it's not preaching that'll make you known as God's child. And it's not theology, having all the right theology, all the catechism or the confession, or being able to memorize all of the Council of Dort's points. And it isn't going to be, being known as a child of God isn't a matter of just how many meetings you attended, or whether you ever attended, or even doing workbooks for discipleship. We're Baptists. We do a lot of workbooks. And being known as a child of God is much, much simpler than that. Jesus is the one that said it. Here's what he said in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Let me read it to you again. Blessed are the peacemakers. Graced, happy, full of joy are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. You know, the word peacemaker here is not passive in the Greek language. It means to pursue something actively. You're making it. You're actively working toward peace. Poieo is the word that we get to. It means to provide or to raise up something, to raise up peace, like you're growing it in your garden. And my garden's doing pretty good, I got to admit. You have to weed it a lot and feed it a lot. But to make peace, you have to raise up peace, grow it like a garden. You know, if you want people, not you yourself defining yourself, there's a lot of that going around. Well, I tell everybody I'm a Christian. Well, that's not as important as them thinking you're a Christian. It's not as important you telling people that you're a child of God as other people saying, now that's a child of God. That person is a child of God. Matter of fact, that's what Jesus said. Happy, blessed, graced are the peacemakers, for they shall be called, not by you, but other people. You shall be called by others the children of God. You have to work at peacemaking. You have to work at making peace between people. That's part of our role in life. And this means real peace, not just tolerating each other. You know, nobody really wants to just be tolerated. I don't want to come by your house and have you tolerate me. I want you to love me. In these days of racism and rage and riots, of political divisions that are seeming to get worse, there's all kinds of actual effort to create division, of family division, sometimes about the same issues, racial divisions, class divisions, people that have more than other people can look down on others, and people that have less can look down on people that have more. It can go both directions. As God's children, as His church, we need to be known for the one thing that we're supposed to be known for. And fortunately, we haven't been known for that a lot, especially when we get wrapped up in worldly power, like the Crusades or many other terrible examples down through time, both in history and in our own experience in our land. God's children, we need to be known for the one thing that Jesus said we ought to be known for, and we will be known for, peacemaking. So let me ask you a question. Are you a peacemaker? Are you a peacemaker in your family, your friend group, Are you a peacemaker on Facebook? Are you a peacemaker on Twitter? Some people think about peacemaking. They think they don't really understand what it means in the Bible. They think peacemaking is domination, or a giant revolver. You ever seen that one? It's a giant revolver called the Peacemaker. No, maybe it's the Peacekeeper. But whatever it is, I've seen one before, and it's giant. But that's not the kind of peace Jesus is talking about. It's not being squished down. Peacemaking is a matter of hearts being changed from ignorance to understanding, from dehumanizing people, turning them into an other, a label, a right winger or a liberal or a this or a that, or all kinds of the racial epithets that people call each other, and sexist epithets sometimes. Peacemaking is moving from ignorance to understanding, from dehumanizing to sacred respect, because God made you, so I'm going to respect you. Matter of fact, everything that God made deserves a certain amount of respect. From hate to love. That's what peacemaking really is. And I understand, only God can change people's hearts. Only God can do that. And that includes yours and includes mine. I need the Prince of Peace to help me have peace. And I can't give people what I don't possess in myself. I can't bring to my church or to my family or to my world what I'm not experiencing. You see, just forcing other people to accept your opinion, or forcing under strength of arms or brute force or law even, doesn't bring peace. Peace is when hearts get changed. You see, only God can help you choose forgiveness. Many times Jesus said, you remember, he said, how many times? 70 times 7. Only God, grace and power, can help you choose forgiveness over resentment. Understanding over foolishness. We've talked a lot about that. Respect for disrespect. And that happens when you ask him to really change your heart. Oh, I've seen all this heartache and loss and violence. Disappointing to me. I tend to expect people to be. I tend to feel like God has put something in people that, even though they're sinners, that they can do good. They have a conscience. God's put it in them. And when you turn to God, he can change. He can illuminate your conscience. And when you ask him to change your heart, you know what he'll do? That's what Romans 5:1 says. Therefore, having been justified by faith, that means completely declared righteous by God, forgiven for everything, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. We have peace with God. And once I receive peace with God, then I can really be a peacemaker. So then how do you do peacemaking? You say, well, what does it take to be a peacemaker? Well, first of all, point 1, listening before you speak. And that's pretty hard for somebody as chatty as I am. People want to be heard. And sometimes when people are getting loud or yelling, it's because they feel like they're not being heard. And so what we have to learn to do, if we're going to be active peace makers, growers, we have to listen to people. Doesn't mean they're right or you're agreeing with them, but they need to be heard. Sometimes people just need to be heard to let off their anger. And you know what? Also the reason why we have to learn to listen before we speak, because when you learn to listen, you earn the right for other people to listen to you. Now, it doesn't mean everybody will, but they may. Proverbs 25:8 says, do not go out hastily to argue your case. All you Facebook warriors ought to think about this. Do not go out hastily to argue your case. Otherwise, what will you do in the end when your neighbor humiliates you? How many times has that happened? You're on this, and then it turns out what you actually posted was fake, or it was wrong, or you had it completely backwards, or it was all a joke. Don't go too quick. Listen. And then Secondly, you need to be a peacemaker is you need to practice honesty when you see you're wrong. You have to be willing to, when you see you're wrong, some of what's happened in our country, as people in general, we have to be able to see where we're wrong sometimes, where we have been blind, where we've been ignorant. You have to be able to be honest when you see that you're wrong, when you see it in yourself. When you see wrong in general, you have to be honest when you see it in yourself. And sometimes after you've seen it in yourself, in that order, you see it in others too. You have to be willing to be honest when you see wrongs, injustice. This is what Colossians 3:9 says. Do not lie to one another, since you laid aside the old self and its evil practices. Remember, he said we put off the old life. I'm stop at doing this, and I'm going to start doing this. We're going to speak truth to each other. As a matter of fact, that's what Ephesians says in chapter 4, verse 5. But speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, even Christ. Isn't that great? That's what we do. That's what Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25 goes on to say too. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you, with his neighbor. For we are members of one another. He's saying you have this relationship with your neighbor. You ought to think of everybody in your life as your neighbor on some level. You speak the truth to him lovingly. And by the way, when we say that we have no sin, when we deceive ourselves, we lie to ourselves. And the truth is not in us. So we want to have truth in us. And if you're going to be a peacemaker, you have to be honest. You have to practice honesty when you see wrong in yourself or in others. And then thirdly, you have to practice humility to make wrongs right. This is the hard part. Pride always leads you. And guys, I speak as a guy. It's easy as a guy to be proud and to double down. To double down. You've already been arguing this and debating this, and then you all of a sudden realize, man, I've been completely wrong. Pride always doubles down, and God will fight you when you're proud. He resists the proud. And guess what? When God fights you, you're going to lose on all kinds of level. So, how do you practice humility to make wrongs right? Well, sometimes you have to do it by apologizing. Confession is a really, really important thing. It really is. Confession is an important thing. There's been a lot of that this week. I've watched it happen over and over again. It's been, people's racist tweets and jokes and memes that they put up are coming back to haunt them. They put stuff up that was completely wrong. Ha ha, really funny. And now it's coming out, and they're getting called out on it. Sometimes it's a long time ago too. I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. I know that all of us can say or do something stupid. Unfortunately, when people do stuff online, it's there forever. I think you want to be a decent person, and I think most of you really want to be good to others. I think you all do, really. But I've heard a lot of people saying, I didn't know how my speech or my indifference or my words or my humor, I didn't know how it hurt people, even close people. I've had lots of talks this week with people who are people of color who have been really insulted, really treated badly, really hurt by, and other people too, not just people of color, sometimes people who've been adopted, and they were teased over that. Lots of different things that can set you apart that you might feel discriminated against. If you're going to be, but this week's been interesting because so much has been this sensitivity, and I think it's a good sensitivity to race. People saying, I didn't know, I didn't understand, I was wrong. The famous quarterback came out this week and said, I didn't know, or I saw the NFL, the head of the NFL came out and said, we were wrong about the way we dealt with this issue. Now you can be cynical and you can say, well, they're just doing that to save their business plan. Well, maybe you're right, but maybe you're not. I even saw Russell Wilson, who you guys know I'm not a super big football fan, but he really came out and said about the things that he had to deal with and how he's been really approaching things differently. He wasn't really saying, he was just really saying about the need for sensitivity in this area. All of us need to learn how to apologize thoroughly. Say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I know that this had to really hurt you. Please forgive me for what I did. And then would you tell me how I can show you that I really mean it? Would you show me how I could prove to you that I'm really making a turn here? I don't know. Sometimes we have to talk to people, and then we all have to be able to listen and learn. And I'm over 60 now. I have to learn more now than ever. Sometimes people get older and we just get stuck in our ways. Well, you don't have to be that way. So there's by apologizing and confession, but also another way that you could practice humility when you realize you're wrong is by restitution. We could be like Zacchaeus, who when he realized what Jesus was and what he's done and what he'd been doing, he said, Lord, I'm going to pay people back as best I can. I'm going to do something good with what I've got. And then lastly, by bridging. Some of you feel like that. You feel like, oh, I'm a bridge in my family. I'm always trying to be a peacemaker. The problem with being a peacemaker is that you kind of don't have an army. You're trying to go between. But listen to what Paul talked about being a bridge between, in all those cultures and all those races. The bridge was his relationship with Jesus. He was doing it for him. And you know this verse, 2 Corinthians 5:17 and 18. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creature. The old things have passed away. Behold, new things have come. Now all things are from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. He gave us the ministry of reconciliation. We are helping people be reconciled with God. And as they get reconciled with God, they can't hate him anymore. They can't diss him anymore. They're reconciled to each other. You see, this idea of bridging is when you decide, I'm going to choose Jesus over being on anybody's side. I'm going to just be on his side. If you please him, it doesn't matter who you displease. And if you displease him, it doesn't matter who you please. As I said, peacemakers get hated by everyone because they have no party. They have no army to back them up. And so they end up, it can be hard, but it's what we're called to do. And I want to tell you the history of a church doing that. So many churches get pulled into all these worldly battles without really caring about the one thing that's going to last, people's relationship with God. So, if you're a bridge, you may be washed out in the raging flood of people's hatred toward one another or some particular person or something. But you know what you'll be called? You'll be called a child of God. And I don't know about you, but that's good enough for me. You will be called, even if your bridge gets washed out over and over again, you will be called a child of God. That's good enough for me. That's good enough for me. Is it good enough for you? Is it? I'd like you to ask this question. Is it good enough for you?